So I just found out that I can no longer stay at this apartment.
There's been a bit of a development.
So I won't be able to stay at the apartment anymore?
No, unfortunately not. No.
And my 6-month contract at my job is coming to an end. So potentially I could end up facing having no job and nowhere to live. So I'll basically be back exactly where I was a year ago before I moved to New York. But instead of despairing, I'm gonna use my pain and turn it into content. I figured this is a perfect opportunity to show you guys all the tips and tricks that I learned the first time I moved to New York City and condense it into a video so you can see how to move to New York City on a budget, because that's essentially what I'm doing here. Is I have to find a job, place to live, and gotta figure it all out. So this video is gonna be how to move to New York City on a budget. Again. To get back into the mindset of someone who's moving to New York City for the first time, I decided to fly back home to Cleveland and develop my game plan there. It was also Easter weekend when I shot this, so I was going back home anyway for family stuff.
Cleveland! This is for you!
When I arrived at my parents' country estate in the suburbs, I was floored by the grandeur and luxury of their living quarters. A washer and dryer within the same dwelling. A dishwasher. Oh my! So much storage that there's empty space. What do they do with all that space? And do you hear that? Birds. Not car horns. Not loud music. Not people on the street arguing. You hear birds. Sensibly, the first question I found myself asking was if it was worth giving all this up. And that's the first step in moving to New York City. Okay, I'm back in my parents' house in Cleveland, and like that overly dramatic scene just said, the first step to moving to New York City is determining if it's really the right city for you. Now, let's be honest with ourselves. New York City is not an easy place to move to. It's dirty, the rent's high, and the people aren't known for being the friendliest people in the world.
Bing bang!
So you'll have to do some soul searching to determine if New York City really is right for you. Why do you want to move there? Is it because you want to move for work? For example, I moved to New York City because I wanted to get a job in the media industry, and I wanted to move to a city where I didn't need a car to get around. Working in journalism, my options were only pretty much Washington, D.C. and New York City. So I chose New York City, and it also has like a sort of European vibe, a little bit to it, which I like because it reminds me of the big European metropolises I visited while I was living in Spain. At least in the United States, it's the closest thing that you can get to like a European type of city that's like walkable, great public transportation. So for me, those were big factors, but maybe you love your car and you're not working in media or Broadway or anything that requires you to be in New York City. So you might want to consider other cities. Like if you work in tech, San Francisco, of course, is an option, but then a lot of companies are moving to Texas, so maybe like Austin would be a good option. But if you are dead set on New York City, maybe you want to work in Broadway, or you want to work in the media industry like me, or you want to be a New York City content creator. Now that you're settled on New York City, if you're like me, you're going to want to find out everything there is to know about the city. And a great place to look for information and do some research is the Ask NYC subreddit. You can also do what you're doing right now and check out content creators who talk about New York, and that's why you should subscribe and hit the like button on this video. But other YouTubers that I like who make videos about New York City are Eric Conover, Brett Conti, and Here Be Bar. But don't watch them, watch me. So you're sold on NYC, you've done the research, now you have to figure out how you're gonna make this work. That's where the budget part of this video comes into play. The most important thing you do before moving to New York City is to make sure you have an income source nailed down. So when I decided to move to New York City, the first thing I did was go on LinkedIn and look for jobs. LinkedIn is weird, it's like corporate Facebook, but it is a very useful website. If you use it for job searching, you can connect with a lot of other professionals in your field and people you went to school with and stuff like that. And there's a job board in LinkedIn. That's where I got my last 2 jobs, was from LinkedIn. I pay for LinkedIn Premium. I think it's useful because it allows me to send DMs to people and I can creep on people without them seeing me view their profile. Once you've got a job lined up and you've figured out your budget, you can start checking out apartments. This is probably the most stressful, hardest part of moving to New York City, especially because right now rents are sky high. Get it? Like skyscrapers, Sky high. If you want to move into a studio, you're looking at paying anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 a month. You should probably start browsing on sites like apartments.com or StreetEasy, and Craigslist actually is underrated, but a lot of apartments on Craigslist. And you just want to like start seeing what's available and what the prices are. Sometimes you're better off going directly to a real estate company because a lot of them have listings that don't even show up online. So that's an option as well. And if you're on a budget, you're going to want to look for apartments that don't have broker fees. So if it says no fee, that's what you want to look for, because a broker fee, in my opinion, is kind of just a bullshit fee. It's paying the person who shows you the apartment and sets up the lease for you, and it's like really expensive and unnecessary, so try to avoid that if you can. And another thing you'll see when you're looking online is a lot of places ask for 40 times the rent. You have to make 40 times the rent. So if you're renting a place for $1,200 a month, you have to make $4,800 a year. No, that's wrong. You have to make $48,000 a year. But in my experience, the 40 times the rent rule isn't really like a super hard rule. I didn't make that much and I was able to move into my apartment. Basically, you have to keep in mind, there's always room to negotiate, and I think landlords are more concerned with you being able to pay the rent and paying on time than what multiple of the rent you earn.
Rent?
But once you look around and see the ideas of how much things cost, you should formulate how much you're willing to pay and start looking for an area to live in. So this is the perks of having parents who own a printer, right? So anything in Lower Manhattan is gonna be pretty expensive. And, oh crap, I just got a marker on my computer. Other areas that a lot of people like to move to that are pretty trendy, like Long Island City, Astoria in Queens, and Williamsburg in Brooklyn. These spots here are pretty trendy and pretty expensive. A good rule of thumb, and this applies to any city, the further you are from the center, the less expensive it's going to be. So you have to find that balance between, if you have to commute, how far you're willing to commute, how long of a commute you're willing to have, and how much you're willing to pay. That was Sharpie too. If you're on a tight budget, the cheapest option is to live with roommates. Now, this can be kind of hard to adjust to, especially if you've lived alone in the past, but everybody in New York City does it. It's basically the entire plot of the show Friends. If you find the right people, it's not that bad. There's a Facebook group called Gypsy Housing where people post open rooms, and if they're looking for subletters or if they're looking for roommates. People also post apartments there. It's a good resource, a good place to look. There's also the option of co-living apartments, which is what I did, and I talked about it in my apartment tour video. Basically, a co-living apartment is like an Airbnb for long stays. You move into a furnished apartment and you pay rent, but everything is included with one monthly fee. So, you know, that's internet, water, gas, heat, everything is just whatever your rent is. It's called co-living, you share it with roommates, but there's also some perks. The one I lived in, there was a cleaning service and they brought some supplies every week, like toilet paper and paper towels and that kind of stuff. I would recommend this option for convenience, especially if you don't know anyone in the city and you don't want to have to move a lot of furniture or buy furniture when you get to the city. But if you're worried about furniture, Facebook Marketplace has a ton of free or really cheap stuff there all the time, so that's worth checking out. But if you don't want to go either of those routes, then you could find roommates on sites like digs.com and spareroom.com. So once you've figured all that out, your budget, the area you want to live in, and whether or not you're going to be living with roommates, then you should figure out your apartment must-haves, your apartment nice-to-haves, and your apartment I don't give a For example, if you must have a washer and dryer in your apartment, then you might have to give up something that is just nice to have, like living close to a metro station. And if you don't give a about having a doorman, then that broadens up your search a lot. This is another thing where the more money you have, the more leverage you have to be picky. So once you've done all this and you've found an apartment that you like, you should go check out the apartment and make sure it's actually what you see online. Because Photoshop exists, and a lot of times what some people do is they'll post photos of a different apartment in the building and say like, oh, it's a similar apartment to this one. And when you get there, it looks nothing like the photos. So that's pretty sketchy and shady, but it happens all the time. So it's worth going and seeing it in person if you're able to. Obviously, you're gonna wanna leverage contacts you have in the city to see if there's a couch you can crash on if you're going to the city to check out an apartment. But what you can also do is stay at a hostel. I don't think many people know that New York City does have hostels, and they're more expensive than other hostels you'll find in other parts of the world, but it is cheaper than a hotel room, so that's an option. That's what I did when I came to the city to check out apartments. So once you've found a place and you've signed your lease, All there's left to do is move. I moved to New York City with just a suitcase and a backpack. I was moving into a furnished apartment, and the first night I slept on a bare mattress with no pillow and just a sleeping bag. That was in my struggle days. I'm still kind of in my struggle days, but I've broken out of that a little bit. But the moral of the story is, if you want to make it happen, you can make it happen. To get to the city, I took the Amtrak train from Cleveland to New York City, which a lot of people didn't even know exists. But yes, you can take a train from Cleveland to New York City. You can take a train all the way from Chicago to New York City. New York City is one of the most well-connected cities in the world, so that is a plus. You have a lot of options to get there, by bus, by train, by flights. I liked taking the train, although it wasn't the most convenient option. It was less expensive than a flight, but it had a lot more space and comfort than a bus. It had like free Wi-Fi and legroom, so I enjoyed the train, although the hours were terrible. I had to get up at like 5 a.m. to take it. Actually more like 4 a.m. But those days are behind me now, and although it's ironic that I'm not in New York City right now while I'm making this video, I do live in New York City. So that's how I moved to New York City on a tight budget, and how you can too. It's not the easiest place to move to, but like they say, if you can make it there, then you can make it anywhere, and if there's a will, there's a way. If you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to see more New York City content. I make videos about travel and culture and self-improvement. So that is it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Good luck moving to New York City. Peace.